Hi, welcome to Smith and Grezzy. We've got a percussional treat in the fact that we've got Steve Jones from the remarkable Cory Band joining us to talk about his playing career and a few issues surrounding percussion in brass band contesting. So welcome, Steve, from me and Sandy.
Morning to you both.
Hi, Steve.
Great stuff.
Thanks for
Nice
having me.
day for it, yeah. So, Steve, where did your playing career, start?
Blimey. So I was probably aged around five or six, and I don't know where this infatuation with drumming came from, but it came from somewhere. Whether I'd seen it on TV or something, I don't know. But I wanted a drum kit for Christmas, and that was what I wanted around about the age of 5. I got a drum kit, a little toy thing, and then my dad had or still has a massive collection of old 45s, and I used to just listen to these records all the time. A lot of records from the 60s, 70s. And so I've listened to these records, and one particular record stood out, and it was called Mistral, and it was by a guy called Cozy Powell. I'd never heard of it.
I remember Cozy Powell.
Yeah. And it was a very haunting track. I remember that, and I remember thinking, "What, you scared the life out of me when I heard it first." But halfway through, this pounding of drumming just started, and I thought, "Whoa, what's this?" And I sort of became infatuated with that track as a kid, and of course put 2 and 2 together. It's obviously a very well-known drummer, and that's where it started. Really, that I just carried on from there. It was just something that caught my imagination at a very early age.
So I bet your parents loved you with a drum kit at that age, but
Yeah, and the neighbours.
Yeah. So what got you into brass bands?
Well, my father, Jeff, he said not long after this, I would have been about 7 or 8, and he said to me one day, I'll see it now, he said, "Do you want to go and join Bream Silver Band or Pillowell Band?" And I thought, what the hell is he talking about? I've got a clue what he's on about. But you trust your parents, don't you? So I said, right. I said, well, I'll go to Bream Band because I think it's closer, so I'll go there. And we went up to one of the junior band rehearsals, and there was a guy there called Dave Rudge who eventually took me under his wing, and he was a big band drummer, local big band drummer, but he was he was a tuba player as well, and he was taking the junior band, so he got me on the kit and whatever. And then he did take me under his wing, and I used to go to his house, and he used to have this little turquoise sparkly snare drum from his dance band drum kit, and we'd sit in his dining room, and he'd have a snare drum and a music stand, and he'd be playing things like "Hey, Look Me Over," "Hey, Look Me Over," la 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 la, and we used to do all these little rhythms on there. And he used to say, "You got to show off when you're on the drums, and you got to do this and that." And I was totally taken with it, straight away. And eventually, they invited me to join the main band, and that's where it came. That's what happened. That's what happened, really. So it was down to my dad. Really.
Wow.
But he's probably regretting it now.
So you weren't given a choice then of what do you want to do? It was either join this brass band or this other brass band.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, obviously too young for rock bands and things like that. Or so the brass band was I suppose this would have been around about 1985. About 1985ish, 84, 85.
That's brilliant.
And so what made you? What made you stick with it then? Because see, this is one of the. It's not a problem for drummers, but it's a good thing for drummers. But if you're a baritone player or a tenor horn player, then you're in a brass band, right?
Yes.
If you're a drummer or a trombonist or even a cornet/stroke trumpet player, you can. The world's your oyster, sort of thing. You can choose whichever genre you wanted. So. What made you sort of stick with the brass band stuff? Was it the repertoire or what?
I think it was
friendship.
I think it was partly yes. I think the inclusivity of it, the fact that you felt you belonged to something.
Right.
I think that's probably what it was in the early days. And I went from one band to another. I went from Bream Band to Colford Town Band in the Forest of Dean. And actually, that Bream Band was where I met Brett first. So he was principal trombone there at the time.
Wow.
So he would have been not about a year older than me. So I got to know Brett.
Me and Sandy met Brett very young in his career at Fairies.
Exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a weird coincidence. So you went round a few bands in the Forest of Dean, and you eventually ended up at Flowers. That's where I first met you.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. So I went there about 1989.
Yeah, they were a great band, weren't they? You know, I mean,
Very much so.
They're obviously even better
pretty
since
good
you've
now,
left.
Yeah, that's probably not a coincidence.
But you know, at the time, it was funny enough. Philip Harper when I met you, and you'd have people like Gary Cutt and Derek Broadbent down, and
Yes.
you know, some real. Richard Evans was regularly there.
Yeah.
But I remember coming along and a very young Philip Harper had you.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Because he'd been taking Thornbury band before that, and I think the band were looking for an MD, and they decided to get Philip in. And you know, he was still is, in my view, a breath of fresh air. I think he wanted to do what he's doing now back then in terms of making the brass bands more progressive, the concerts and things like more interesting, I suppose, really.
Yeah.
But I think, with all due respect to the band at that time, it didn't have the players there to quite make the impact, especially on the contest stage as well.
Right.
So yeah, I think he was a bit ahead of his time.
Yeah. Well, at Flowers, I did a couple of rehearsals. I sat in with you when I were working down there, and you could tell he had some fantastic ideas and he wanted to progress. But like you say, the band wasn't quite ready for him.
No.
You know, he was one step in, well, more than one step in front of them at the time. So eventually you left Flowers and you went to Cory.
I went to Tredegar first for a year.
Did you?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Ian Portis invited me to go there. I think I'd helped them out on a couple of jobs. And he said, well, look, there's a seat if you want it. And I thought, well, to be honest with you, I've been here for 21 years now. And I just felt it was time for a bit of a change, really.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I went there for a year, and it was really enjoyable. So it was something new and fresh. And it was nice to have that after being in one band for so long. But then about a year after that, I had a phone call from Bob saying, there's a space here if you want it. And I thought, well, you can't turn that down, can you? So I did. And I've been here ever since.
How long have you been at Cory now, Steve?
Well, since early 2011, I did have a little sabbatical. I went back to Flowers for a bit because I was still living in Gloucester at the time. So
it's quite a way, isn't it?
It is. And the Flowers band at that particular time was about 5 minutes from my house. So the journey was it was a 2-hour journey there and back, to Cory. But then eventually I moved to South Wales anyway and rejoined the band. It's just funny how things turn out, isn't it?
Go on then, show us your medals. You must have won quite a few now.
I haven't got them here. I'm at the band room now, actually, because I'm doing a lesson in a minute later on. So, but I've decided to come here. I've got a great internet connection as well. So that's the other reason.
One of the things we do ask Steve's of players like yourself that come on is there must be many highlights of your banding career. Have you got a few that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think it's obviously it sounds such a cliche, doesn't it? But it's your contest wins as well, isn't it? More than anything, and tours as well and things like that. But highlights for me would be, I think, winning the West of England area with Flowers first. That was a great one. We were up against the mighty Sun Life at the time, so it would have been 1991.
Goodness.
And the test piece was Journey into Freedom.
They were a great band.
And Derek Broadbent was at the helm. And he was absolutely adamant that we were going to beat the Italians, as he called them. So he said we're going to have them, and he absolutely nailed that piece to the wall, really.
Yeah.
And I think even at the time I thought we're not going to beat Sun Life, and we did. We won it by 2 points, and I think that was the catalyst for where Flowers are today. Really, I think having someone like Broadbent in, but that was a great. That was a great moment. Probably winning my first major with Cory. What would that have been? That would have been a European, I think. 2013, possibly. Yeah, wherever that was. So that was great. And tours as well. So obviously we had a tour to South Korea a couple of years ago, which was very interesting.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. Apart from, getting stuck over there and the flight leaving us behind. It was great. We had an extra couple of days there. It was fine. It was good fun. But yeah, things like that. And I think we did a job at the London Palladium a few years ago, which for me, being a TV geek and an entertainment geek was fantastic because getting to play a place like that and you sit on that stage thinking, who hasn't trod these boards?
Yeah.
So that was great. That was really good as well. So yeah, there's a number of highlights.
So in your team of percussionists at Cory, is it a team of 4, 5? How many?
It's a team of 4. We've got myself. We've got Alistair Woodman, who was my brass band drumming hero when I was younger.
Right.
Even though I didn't know he was only a couple of years older than me, because he came from Sun Life, and I was like, "Whoa, that's my idol," So we got Alistair there as well. We've got Dave Mitchell, who's recently rejoined the band, and we've got Matthew Roach, who's playing tube percussion as well, and Graham Law. So Graham comes in and out, as and when we need a fifth, really. So that's our current team, but it's a great team as well. It works really well. Yeah,
the percussion section always comes across very well in your performances. And I'm quite proud because there's my mate on stage, and we've known each other for a long time now, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely.
So, which standout contest performances have you had? Have you ever been on stage where you think we're going to win this?
Well, probably once. 2016 Open, I think it was. That's probably the only one really where I thought that's going to be hard to beat, that one. I can't think what the test piece was now. At the British Open 2016, I have no idea what it was. No idea.
I can't remember.
I can't remember what I did last week, Simon.
No, it's funny, Steve, when you say that, because I mean, there are only 1 or 2 that I've been involved in, and you think, yeah, we're going to win this.
Yeah.
One was Solid to Youth way back in the 80s.
Yes.
In the year that we won everything, and during that last movement, I just thought, yeah, this is. You can just tell, but there are very, very few, aren't there? Because there's always that sort of doubt. But there's just 1 or 2. The other one was probably Devil in the Deep Blue Sea at with Fairies at London. But those are the only 2 where I thought, yeah, we're going to win this.
Definitely. I'm glad you mentioned that one, Sandy, because that for me is the ultimate contest performance for me.
I thought we were going to win that, Sandy, after you finished the horn solo unscathed.
I thought so very much. I managed to scrape through it. No, but it's true though that there are very few that you think, yeah, absolutely, because there's always that niggly doubt, isn't there? Other things go wrong. I'll take one that I really enjoyed, Steve, last year when I judged the Welsh Championships area, and it was the variations on an Enigma.
Oh yeah.
That was I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a tremendous. I think we spoke afterwards on the stage. And stuff. That was I really enjoyed that, and that sort of lifted my spirits a bit. That, to be fair, because
it felt good, that one.
It's what
it felt good.
It did. I mean, it was just so full of energy, life, spirit, everything about it, and it was clean as hell. It really did sort of restore my faith a bit in the possibilities, because it's hard sometimes. Things are tough at the minute for bands.
They are.
Bands are struggling, and suddenly to hear a performance like that with so much sort of joy and verve and everything about it, and I mean, what a piece! I mean, just such a tremendous,
It really is. The piece helps, doesn't it, Sandy? Because if you enjoy playing that particular piece, it's going to come across from the stage anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there are some that I've played in. Some of the earlier European. I can't even remember if somebody said your life depends on singing any bit of this piece. I couldn't do it, and we probably won it.
Yeah, but right.
But when you get a piece like that, and it's just, the guy is a genius, Philip Spark.
Yeah. Oh, he's my favourite brass band composer.
He just knows what to do and how to do it. Yeah. But that was such an enjoyable experience for me.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. We enjoyed it.
I mean, we did talk afterwards, and it was great. It's funny that though. I would have said probably if I'd been playing on that, I would have thought, we're going to win it.
There's always an element of doubt in my head, though. I mean, we've all been there.
No. Yeah,
we've all been there where it's been a fantastic performance and we've had nothing from it, and then we've had not an average performance and won it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the times when you think, how have we managed that? You know,
You take it.
But yeah, you do, and you're right in saying that contest performances they do stand out for obvious reasons, but it's the other things as well, isn't it? It's
Yes.
tours and the camaraderie and the funny stories and everything else that goes on.
Definitely, and there's always too many to mention.
Yeah, yeah. We're on about the role of percussion in bands and stuff, because it has changed over the years, hasn't it? Have you noticed the difference? Because you've been involved at this sort of the thick end of it, when percussion writing really got more involved. I mean, you were probably there right from the start, weren't you?
Yeah, I think so. Looking back in time, when I first started, it literally was just a normal percussion instrument. So 2 or 3 timpani, small drum kit, concert bass drum. I don't even think we had a concert snare drum when I first joined Flowers. It was just the concert bass drum. That was it. A small sort of xylophone. I don't even think we had vibraphone. So it was just a small plethora of instruments. And it's completely. I mean, if you look at our band now, it's completely overtaken the band. And a lot of players come here now and say, "Well, have you got room for the band?" I'm in the room at the moment here talking to you guys in the percussion room, and it's just full of gear, as is the band room. So looking back, you think, blimey, this really has grown. And I think it happened sort of early 2000s, I think. The test pieces started to add lots more percussion in, like marimbas, more sort of all the time. There seemed to be a plethora of test pieces that came in, and you're thinking, blimey, we'll have a marimba again. So it was
right.
That kind of thing. The pieces like Extreme Makeover as well. All these different test pieces came in, and it's just grown. And you haven't really noticed it because but when you do look back on the older test pieces, you think, blimey, that says a lot more going on now with percussion.
Do you find yourselves? Forgive my naivety, but you're rushing about a lot more, changing instruments and having to organise the logistics of how are we going to play this part and then get to this instrument, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is that
totally? And I'm pretty limited because I'm mainly kit, mainly a kit player. I can play a bit of tune if I'm forced to or have to, but I have to practice it very hard. But I can play all the other percussion instruments. But I do find now we're having to rewrite things just to get around the kit, really, around all the different instruments. And it's a big job to do that, I think. And we're very lucky that Matthew in our band will take the parts home and put them through Sibelius and rewrite the whole parts, so we can get through
logistically.
Yeah.
I mean, percussionists, you'll agree with this, they're famously a breed unto themselves, aren't you? Every band I've been in, I think I've told this little story before. Once, an old guy in Whitburn band when I was about 12, he says, there's always a madman in a brass band, son. He says, it's always the soprano cornet, the bass trombone, or the percussionist, you know. And they are a breed to themselves, percussionists, aren't they? But I get the impression, and always have done, that the percussion teams, they like that sort of, they like being a sort of set apart. They like being sort of their own, not a clique, but they like having their own sort of team that is a bit mysterious and, keep the brass players out, we'll sort ourselves out and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And then there's the famous, all getting the gear up and down and all that sort of thing,
Yes, that's right.
Do you get much help from the Cory?
We do.
Are they all right?
We do. They understand that the more hands that help, the quicker we're all going to get away from the venue. So they're pretty good with that, really.
So not many tackle dodgers then.
No, not really. No, I drive the van to most gigs. So I like to pack things down and have everything packed properly in the correct cases. And so I'm at the end of every gig, I'm trying to pack the gear down properly, and then someone goes, "Come on, you've got to get on the van because you've got to load as well." So I have to get to the van, get on there, and I've got a certain way that it loads onto the van. And it is a very, very sort of, you have to be very intricate in the way you pack. I'm glad I played Tetris when I was a kid, because loading that van is exactly the same sort of thing. But you've got to take care of everything and take care of your instruments and make sure it's all. You've got to plan things really with percussion before rehearsals. I come here on a Monday and Thursday, and as soon as I come here, there are things to do before band. So you've got to get certain instruments ready for certain pieces. Obviously, Philip will text the band or WhatsApp the band saying, this is the menu for tonight. So you have to look at this menu and think, right, I need this, I need that. So it all has to be done before band starts. And it generally starts around 7:20 if everyone sat down. So those 10 minutes would be lovely to have back, just to even just to set some tempo blocks up or something, but we don't get that chance. So I'm rushing around like mad before rehearsal, and I sit down absolutely sweating.
You're probably about the only section as well that ends up doing sort of running repairs all the time and keeping the equipment, because it'll get bashed or knocked about at a gig or whatever else.
Definitely. I've got a toolbox here, Sandy. I'll bet. I've got a toolbox here with all spares and tools in, and we take it to most concerts because something could happen. If that happens, you've had it really. So I make sure that goes with us everywhere. So you've got to be prepared for every eventuality, really. So it's not just about being a drummer.
You know what Jacko used to do, Sandy, when we were setting up stage on the concert? He'd set the bass chairs out really quite a long way back from the horns. And I used to, when I first joined the band, I was moving them forward because I like being tight up at the back of the horns. He went, no, leave them there. Just watch. And then we walk on stage. The conductor takes his bow and then he grabs his chair and moves forward by about 1.5 meters just to get away from percussion.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I never forgot that. I always did it myself.
Steve, do you often think... Does the amount of stuff you're expected to play, different instruments and stuff, do you sometimes think, this is just getting a wee bit out of hand?
Oh, yeah, all the time. All the time. And I think the older you get, the less you want to have to pack up and down. There's a famous meme on Facebook where this massive drum kit in this bedroom that says bedroom drummer. And then there's a small 4-piece drum kit underneath a photo of that, and it says professional drummer.
Yeah.
You do get. I mean, obviously, I love it. I absolutely love it, and I moan like mad about having to take gear up and down and adding gear and things really. But underneath it all, I do love it really. To be honest, it's there's nothing like brass banding really, is there?
No,
not for me.
No.
So which brings us on, Steve. There's a big debate going on at the minute generally about percussion in brass bands.
Yeah.
Through the 5 sections. And there's a huge debate about whenever, most of it is test piece orientated, especially the nationals and stuff. And whenever a piece gets out, you can't please everybody, you can't please anybody most of the time. But there is an issue though, because going back to, I don't know, probably about the time that you started properly, there was a bit of a push, wasn't there, to make percussion a bit more, I don't know how you just expand percussion a bit and make it more, so more instruments, more stuff going on, all that stuff. But at the moment, it just seems that certainly in lower sections, that it's sort of backfired slightly. What's the situation where you are as regards local lower section bands having enough percussionists or the equipment?
Well, I think a lot of the lower bands, some of them are very slowly starting to get more instruments through things like lottery grants or whatever, music grants, which is great. But of course, their rehearsal facilities sometimes can't take all these, in terms of space. It's very, 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 very limited in terms of space. But in terms of percussionists as well, myself and Alistair, we actually helped out at the South East Wales Association contest back in November. and we helped to move all the percussion all day. It was great fun. They used a concert percussion that we use at Cory. We brought that along, so they had good gear to play on, and we helped out. And we sat there and listened to all the bands, and actually we were actually surprised in some ways that there were some very, very good young percussionists coming through. Now, whether some of these have been borrowed or not, I don't know, but I don't think they had. So I think, with all the doom and gloom around percussionists, I think there is a healthy contingent coming through. But I think there's been over the last few years, they've started getting interested again. So it for me, I think there's something there, but you've got to keep them interested. You've got to keep them. You've got to keep their attention as well. And it gets harder and harder every year, I think. There's so many distractions in the world today.
Are you finding yourself quite busy teaching that?
A little privately, I've got a few pupils. Yeah, I got a few pupils privately. It's I teach in schools as well. Obviously, that's my main job. But of course, they're not really interested in the percussion thing. All they want to do is bash a drum kit. So you can talk to them about brass bands and how great they are, and they're not the usual sort of brass bands you'd see on a bandstand on a Sunday afternoon all the time. A lot of these bands are great, aren't they? So I try and push that narrative to the kids, but a lot of them in the schools aren't interested. But I do have a number of youngsters who are already in bands themselves. So you try and inspire them and get them interested and keep them interested. I think that's the most important thing, is to try and keep their interest up.
So, Steve, you know how let's hypothetically work out an area contest. You've got your top bands all wanting, let's say, 4 percussionists, and in Lancashire and Yorkshire, for instance, there's a lot more bands. There can be 15 bands in each section.
Yeah.
So that's 4 percussionists 15 times, and then you move down to the first section, and they might need 3. And then you move down and they might need 2 or 3, and so the story goes on. It's a tremendous amount of percussionists, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Do you think lower down the sections that bands would be helped by the possibility of borrowing percussionists from each other?
I think it's a no-brainer, personally.
Yeah.
I think that it's proven that, the amount of times I've sat on the side of a stage when I'm helping out with percussion, laying out on contests, and I've thought, blimey, I'm here. I could help out here, even just playing the smallest part.
Yeah.
It's not going to make a massive amount of difference to the result.
No.
So it would be, for me, I think it's a no-brainer. We should be allowed to mix and match and get percussionists to help out other bands in all sections.
Yeah. You see, my general feeling on it is that, okay, there might be 15 bands in the championship section in some areas.
Yeah.
But is there actually? Are you with me?
I am absolutely with you, yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm thinking that's clogging up at most of the percussionists, because these so-called championship section bands, some of them shouldn't even be there.
Well, Simon, we've talked about this before, but and just for Steve's benefit, like round here in where I am, in West Yorkshire, there's a lot of lower section bands have lost percussionists to championship or first section bands because they think they need 4 or even 5 percussionists, and these percussionists who are playing with second, third, fourth section bands, they're sort of lured by the glamour of, the first section or whatever else. But then, so they're all gravitating upwards, which just means then, that, well, A, they're not ready, but B, the lower section bands end up with none.
None, absolutely, yeah.
But then our problem is if we're choosing music panel, if we choose a piece like Red Priest, right?
Yes.
4 or 5 percussion, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we do bourgeois diversions, 2, maybe 3 percussion at the most.
Yeah.
But what do? Do we keep choosing pieces that have 5 percussion for the top section all the time, which means not playing some really good stuff?
Yes.
or, I mean, how do we work it out? This is the conundrum, and I think it's an idea that Duncan Beckley came up with, which is still being discussed and talked about freeing percussionists up from the registry, so that, for instance, if you do have a piece in the top section that only has 2 or 3, then if you've got a couple of spare percussionists, they could be playing with someone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see that. It's like you say, Steve. It will not make, and this is going to sound terrible, a massive difference to the result, but it will make a massive difference to the participation. I mean, I would like to find out how many percussionists are sat idle this time, because there is less percussion in the top section, and how many bands in the lower section would have benefited from having one of those percussionists, playing. Again, it goes back to this idea about percussionists being able. If you're good enough to play like you are at Cory, you could be playing, the local Amdram, My Fair Lady, for 2 weeks. Yes. And then another one, you could be doing all that sort of stuff as well, couldn't you?
Definitely.
Playing big bands or playing pub gigs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't know. It's a debate that I think we need to keep going with, and I think we need to be less. I think part of the problem is it was discussed last year, and 1 or 2 people who frankly should know better, who are on regional committees, said, "Well, I don't see what the problem is. We've got 3 percussionists, so we're all. I'm all right, Jack.
I'm all right, Jack. Exactly. Yeah.
So, but it doesn't help the overall. I think that's part of the problem with banding in general, though, that nobody sees. Very few people see the bigger picture. They only see their band.
That is true.
I would just like to see them be able to. It would help loads of things, I think.
Oh, it really would.
Really would. Percussion.
I mean, to be honest with you, the most percussion players you want in a brass band anyway, irrespective of whatever section you're in, is 3. I mean, you'll have someone playing timpani, someone on drum kit, and someone doing the odds and ends and tunes. And that for me is great. I mean, I've played in top bands where we've had 2. Top bands, and we've got away with 2 playing. But I think that the problem we've got is that it's just the nature of the beast of brass banding, and it always has been. And it sounds like I'm trying to get out of the conversation, but I'm not. It's just how it is. And like you said, with the choice of test pieces, you're damned if you pick a piece for 5, and you're damned if you pick a piece for 2 or 3. But yeah. Free it up. I mean, we just need to be able to play for who we want to play for. I think in terms of percussion, and it will help bands out immensely. It really would. Otherwise, bands are going to start pulling out of contests.
Yeah,
and they're going to get quite disillusioned with it.
Has this been driven by? I mean, you've got a lot of recent experience at the European, right? Is this been driven by the sort of test pieces that are being set for the European? That the percussion parts are just getting.
It could well be. Yeah, it could well be, and it's filtering down. That could be a part of the problem, actually, because some of the percussion parts are absolutely crazy, as you know, and it takes about 10, 15 minutes between each band sometimes just to set.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed with a lot of what you call the keyboard stuff, right? So Glock, xylophone, marimba, all that sort of stuff. That a lot of the writing, it seems to me, is just sort of, right, I'm going to have to make it more difficult. I'll tell you what, that big line of semiquavers that I've given to the solo cornets, flashing about for 32 bars, I'm going to cut and paste that onto xylophone.
Yes.
Is that a fair assessment?
Pretty much, I think. Yeah, pretty much. There are a lot of pieces I've played where if you left some of the tune percussion out, it's always covered somewhere in the band sometimes.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
But we get things submitted to the panel and other stuff that you look up and try to get to know lower section stuff. And the percussion writing is ridiculously hard because it's cut and pasted from euphonium lines or cornet lines, and you'd expect it to be some sort of xylophone genius to play in a second section band, and that, with the best one in the world, that's not going to happen.
No,
is it?
No, not at all. Not at all.
You know, I think it's
certainly not
it's
for me
asking
anyway.
an awful lot.
I'm not a telephone genius. But yeah, it's a funny situation. It really is, and I think the music has kind of outgrown bands in some ways. Bands are sort of sat still.
I think it has in the UK, Ween.
Yes, I think you're right.
You know, abroad they seem to have not too much problem getting older percussionists, but we do in England and Scotland.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. We've been to Europe and we've seen that. We did a concert. I think it was I'm not sure where it was. It was in France or Switzerland somewhere last year, and it was a local contest. Something akin to the Gloucestershire Brass Band Association contest. It was very small, but it was very well attended, and they had some great bands there. And the percussion guys and girls there were just phenomenal. And there were plenty of them. So, and I said to Alistair, what are we doing wrong over here?
Well,
to not attract the players?
I think people tend to forget that in Norway, there's about, in total, 50 or 60 bands, brass bands, I think. I might be wrong. People in Norway will correct me. In their championships, there's about 50 or 60 bands competing. Okay, there may be more. But we have about 500 bands, 450 bands. Still, our band movement, for all its faults and bands packing in and all this sort of thing, we still have a massive number of bands.
Yes.
But this side, where do you get new players from? This is the problem, because the school system is in dire straits, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
Well, we've had two guests on Sunday, and they just simply said we make our own.
They do, but they are the exception, aren't
Correct.
They?
Yeah.
I was started in the school system with a free instrument and free lessons.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of it at the same time, who would never have got into it otherwise. And nowadays it's almost impossible, isn't it? The whole thing is on its knees.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just the British culture compared to the culture abroad. I'm assuming it's still very new in Europe, brass band, I think, compared to over here. So the enthusiasm hasn't waned, and it hasn't waned over here. But there's so many other things in this country that distract from brass banding, and that probably to the average bander is probably more important than brass banding.
I think you're right, and I think when you look at the sort of Norway, Switzerland scene, the banding scene there is probably about 60 years old, maybe 60, 70 years at maximum, and probably only the last 40 years it's made a real sort of impact. They're in that sort of honeymoon period of finding things out and the sort of enthusiasm for it all, and we're a bit British, aren't we?
Very much so.
Oh God, there's so many things. It's dead interesting, Steve, though, to talk about the percussion situation. Have you found maybe over the years that you've had or you've known people who have got to a certain standard, but then had their eyes opened by big bands, rock bands, whatever else, and just sort of moved away from brass bands?
Yeah. I think I almost did it myself in the 1990s. I joined a rock band, and and your eyes sort of taken off the ball, and you're thinking, "Whoa, this is something different. This is great." You're not playing boring brass band music. But there was something that drew me back to brass banding. And again, I go with the camaraderie point of view, because you all had this thing you wanted to achieve as a team. So that was great, really, having that to come back to. But there's been lots of players I know of in the past that have just literally filtered away. They've gone. That's it, and you can't really get them back a lot of the time once they've discovered something a bit more new and interesting. But some players do come back, which is great. But life gets in the way as well, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, it certainly does.
So, Steve, what do you consider the main issues banding has currently, and do you have any potential solutions for this?
Well, I think we've just covered it really. For me, with the percussion situation, and ensuring that percussionists can move and play through different sections for different bands at competitions. A lot of bands, and not just lower section but championship as well. If they can't get percussion players in, they will literally pull out a contest saying we can't go. So I think
Right.
you not only would you be helping the band, you'd be helping the actual event.
Yeah.
Because you've got another band there.
Yeah.
So
I think
Would
it's
you also be helping to keep those percussionists involved in banding as well, from what you're talking about?
Yeah. You've got to keep their interest up, without a doubt.
that's absolutely brilliant, and it aligns with our thoughts completely. We've talked about this over the last few months. Yeah. Steve, I can only thank you for coming along on this Sunday morning to chat with me and Sandy. It's been fantastic to have a non-brass player.
That's what they call us now, is it?
Well, yeah, I've got other words.
He was going to say non-musician.
Well, he's not wrong.
So on behalf of Smith and Grezzy, Steve, we wish you all the best for 2025, and thank you for coming along, and we'll see you around, and we'll no doubt have a beer.
Thank you, chaps, very much for having me.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have my roast now.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.